Hello. I am here today to do my quarterly reading survey. This is the first one. I thought it would be nice to kind of like assess my reading habits every 3 months. I wanted to do this because I think it's pretty interesting and also just try to be more conscious with the literature that I am consuming. Okay, so I have been using the reading log from Book Riot. I believe I'll put a link in the description box if you're interested in using it as well. It's really handy. Basically, you just put in the title, publishing date, etc., and then you get these beautiful statistics with regards to your reading habits. Okay, to start off with a general summary, between January and March, I read 50 books and I DNF'd 2. And I'm actually pretty good at knowing what type of stories I would like. And it's actually quite weird because I usually base it off of, like, does the book cover look good? And I know that's super shallow, but I also consider the synopsis. So, and funny enough, those two were actually both non-fiction books. I DNF'd Deep Work by Cal Newport and another book which was like Burnout, Solve Your Stress Cycle. And I DNF'd Deep Work because I had read a book by Cal Newport previously, So Good They Can't Ignore You. I actually even did a whole review as to why I really didn't enjoy it all that much, and for those same reasons I did DNF'd Deep Work. I actually only picked it up because I had already bought it before I finished reading So Good They Can't Ignore You. And then Burnout, I didn't finish that one because I was incredibly stressed, and so I thought, okay, let me just pick up that book and see if that will help me out. But it had like 227 pages, and I was just getting stressed out by the idea of having to read that entire book on how to like not burn out. So I DNF'd after 2 pages. Yeah. Moving on to format. So I read 43 books in print, 3 digital. What? I read 4 books. I read 3 ebooks. So digital. Wow. And I listened to 4 audiobooks. And this also doesn't really surprise me. I would have actually expected to have listened to more audiobooks because I do have a subscription service, but I actually only listen to audiobooks when I'm about to fall asleep. So a lot of what I'm listening to, I'm actually not remembering. So, that then makes sense. And I don't really like reading ebooks. If I can, I'll try to read in print. Also because I love taking notes, especially when I'm reviewing. So it's just easier for me to read books in print. Yeah, and then audience. I read 44 adult books, 2 children's and middle grade books, and 4 YA books. That doesn't surprise me. And actually, at the end of March, I was feeling really burnt out because a lot of like the adult books were like literary fiction, and I was just really like craving something that I wouldn't say is not trying to reach something like more meaningful, but just something that's more chill. So I hope in the future to have more of a balance there because it was definitely an adult heavy period. Then moving on to new releases vs backlist. So 35 books were from the backlist and the other 15 were published this year. And at the start of this year, I said I wanted to be better when it came to reading arcs. So yeah, I guess that has improved. But I've actually gotten to the point where I'm like, I would actually like to read less like upcoming books and be a little bit more selective in that, and actually read more like non-Western classics. Because if you think about it, reading 15 books from like one single year, and I'm pretty sure it's mainly America and the UK, I don't know, it feels like I'm missing out. Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. So I'm gonna lie a bit low when it comes to arcs now. Yeah, okay, then what else do we have? Non-fiction vs fiction. I read 37 fiction books and 13 non-fiction books, and I'm actually surprised by that because I am not really that much of a fan of non-fiction. Like, I've never really been one to read like memoirs and stuff like that. Although I do at times like to read self-help books. So I'm just wondering like which 13 books were non-fiction. But yeah, I would have expected to not have read more than 5 non-fiction books. So that's actually quite interesting. Okay, now moving on to the type of literature. 20 books were prose. I read 1 poetry collection, 5 novellas, 13 comics, 3 essay collections, 5 short story collections, and 3 plays. Did I read 3 plays? I can't even remember reading 3 plays. I'm so confused right now. But yeah, comics would definitely have expected to have read lots of those because I love comics. Poetry, yeah, I have been trying to read more poetry, so reading 1 is already a huge improvement for me. Novellas, I would have expected to have read more novellas, but usually the ones that I read are all from Tor.com. But yeah, that doesn't really seem out of the normal. Oh yes, essay collections. Okay, now I understand the non-fiction stuff, because like I read, for instance, an essay collection from Rebecca Solnit, which I really, really enjoyed. Yeah, looking at this division, I would love to read some more poetry. I do have, I think, 5 or 6 collections in my room, so I'll try and read those in the coming weeks. Okay, male vs female vs non-binary vs other. Okay, I read 25 books that were written by males, 24 by females, and 1 by a non-binary author, and 0 by other. And yeah, I can definitely see that I should do better with this. I should be looking more for queer authors. I am quite happy though that this is like more spread out than like how I used to read previously. Not that I was like assessing this, but I could remember that most of the literature that I read growing up was like all written by men. So now it's like 50% male and 24% and 48% female. Yeah, so I'm gonna try and do better with that and seek out more queer literature. Then people of colour. I read 29 books that were written by people of colour, and 27 books that had a protagonist that was a person of colour. So that's just over 50%, 58% with the author and 54% with the protagonist. So I'm actually quite happy with that percentage. So that's something that I would love to keep consistent, if not even increase. When it comes to queer authors, this definitely can be improved. I only read two, and I'm pretty sure it's Jean Kyung Fraser and Akwaeke Emezi. Then for queer protagonists, those were 6. So it's 12% for the protagonist and 4% for the author. So yeah, I do have to improve on that. I do think that the number for queer authors might be slightly higher because I haven't researched every author's sexual identity. Yeah, but still it's really low, so I definitely have to do better with seeking out those types of authors. Okay, moving on to books that were translated. I read 12, which is 24%, which actually isn't too bad. I think I would like to have that number around 50%, but I'm happy that it at least is quarter of what I'm reading. But yeah, I do feel like it has increased from last year, because then I wasn't even seeking those out. I read 20 books that were own voices, which is 40%, which I think is actually pretty good. I would like to have that percentage a bit higher, maybe 50 or 60, but that's something to be mindful of. Then I reread one book. I'm pretty sure that was Riot Baby by Toshi Onyebuchi. And yeah, moving on. Next is star ratings. Now I've actually stopped rating books on Goodreads because I don't know, I feel it's like a flawed way of evaluating a book. Everyone has their own interpretation of what 3 stars is. So yeah, I've just kind of stopped that, and now I just only give my opinion. But I do still star rate them in this reading log because I can at least see the aggregation of those stars. So it kind of shows how much I enjoyed books overall. So looking at books that were 4 stars or higher, that was, if I can calculate this really fast, 62%. So 62% was 4 stars or higher, which I believe is pretty good. Then 3.5 stars, and 32%. And I gave 2 books a 2-star rating and 1 book a half rating. So yeah, like I said, that's kind of the reason why I don't DNF books, because most of the books I tend to enjoy. Moving on to pages, it seems that I really do enjoy books that are short. Yeah, I would say that's fair. I read 16 books that were between 101 and 200 pages, and 10 that were shorter than 100 pages, and then 22 were between 201 and 400. Then I read one that was between 401 and 500, and then finally I read one that was between 601 and 700. And I'm pretty sure that the ones that had more pages were compendiums of comics, because I know that No Longer Human had 616 pages, but it was a manga. But yeah, I definitely tend to enjoy shorter stories more. Okay, we have genre. So general fiction, I read 14 books, 3 sci-fi, 5 fantasy, 1 romance. Okay, interesting. 2 historical, 1 crime mystery, 13 horror, 1 classics. That can't be right. I'm pretty sure that, genres intersect and you can only pick one. So this is not completely true. I read 2 memoirs or bios. That's interesting. And two that were about current events or politics, and one self-help book. That's really interesting. I'm wondering which one was like a memoir bio, because I can't remember for the life of me. Oh, I get it. Okay, yeah, so the bio thing makes sense. I read this one comic about this woman. It was like a feminist book about like embracing your body and stuff like that. So that all makes sense. Then moving on, nation of origin. Ooh, okay, I can definitely improve on this. 24 books came from the US, 10 from the UK, 10 from Japan, 2 from Nigeria, 1 from Jamaica, 2, wait, no. Yeah, 1 from Laos, 1 from Colombia, and 1 from Argentina. So yeah, this is something that I really, really want to improve because, like I said previously, lots of US and UK, and I want to read more than just like from those two countries. Japan makes sense because I love to read manga, and I'm also doing the year of the Asian Reading Challenge, so I've been reading more of that. Though I have read also like some proper Japanese proper, you know what I mean, non-manga literature. Yeah, so I need to improve on that. Okay, so we have gone through the stats. Oh yeah, I forgot one chart. Books finished by month. So you can see in January I read about 20, March 25, and February I believe it was 4. So the reason for that dip was obviously the Blacklit challenge. I had expected to have made like most of the videos that I wanted to upload like before the challenge started, but like it was so much work. I didn't expect it to be so much work, so I ended up sacrificing my reading time for the Blacklit challenge and like keeping it running and like interacting with people, especially on Instagram. So do I regret that? No, not at all. It was such a fun month. It was so great to see how enthusiastic everyone was with regards to the challenge. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. With regards to March, I'm actually surprised that I read so much, but I'm pretty sure it's also because of like comics and stuff. Because like towards the end of March, that was kind of like when the pandemic really hit here, and my reading just went like down the drain. Yeah, so I would say I'm pretty proud of myself. Yeah. Okay. So now it's thoughts. So the favorite book that I read was The Death of Vivek Oji by Ikweke Emezi. I've talked about this book before, and I have a reading vlog on it. And I said that it was my all-time favorite book, and it still is. It was really good. So to give a quick summary, this story is about Vivek, who is half Nigerian, half Indian, I believe, and grows up in Nigeria. And the book starts off with Vivek's mother, who finds Vivek on the floor dead and wrapped in colourful fabric. And the story kind of like traces Vivek's life from the start to the end, and it's amazing. It's so good. So I loved it. It was perfect for me. Okay, favorite character. That was the narrator of Miss Ice Sandwich by Miyako Kawakami. So it's this boy, and he is obsessed with a woman who sells ice sandwiches in a supermarket, and he's just mesmerized by how well she does her job and by her ice blue eyelids. And the story really is about the trials of growing up and being confronted with the darker parts of life. And it was really, really interesting. The boy was so cute and young. You just wanted to like grab him, protect him from the world. I really, really enjoyed the story, and yeah, the character was just really great, and yeah, just well done. Yeah. Okay, most heartbreaking book. So the death of Vivek Oji shattered me completely. I needed like 2 or 3 days to even process my feelings. But another one that kind of broke me was White Bird by R.J. Palacio, the same person who wrote Wonder, I believe. And the story is about a grandmother. It's actually a comic, which he both wrote and drew. And this grandmother, she tells her grandson, who actually is one of the bullies, I believe, from Wanda, she tells him about her life during the Second World War. She was Jewish and so had to hide from the Nazis. And yeah, as you can imagine, with most stories from like war times, it was really heartbreaking. Okay, so the favorite new author you discovered, I would say Miyako Kawakami, the person who wrote Miss Ice Sandwich. I just really liked the story, and I would love to read more of her work. She recently had another book published in English called Breast and Eggs, and it's about women and standards, and I feel like it's going to be the same thing with a lot of Japanese literature when it comes to people within society not conforming to the standards that are set for them, and I always find that a very interesting theme. So hopefully I will be able to get my hands on that book soon. Then favorite debut novel, Days of Distraction by Alexandra Chang. I spoke about this in my previous video as well. It's about this Chinese American tech reporter who works in LA, and she just deals with racism and misogyny, and it's just really hard for her to break through at work, and then her boyfriend gets admitted to a PhD program in upstate New York. I think Ithaca. Is that how you say it? Ithaca. And yeah, and so she decides to pack her bags and go with him to New York. And yeah, the story really is about it's an exploration of race, interracial relationships, identity, her identity specifically, and I just thought it was wildly interesting. Also, the way the structure of the book was really, really, and also the structure of the book was very interesting because you have like the main story, and then in between you also have, like, for instance, articles, and she's trying to write herself as well, so you have pieces of the main character's prose, and sometimes even just like random conversation. So yeah, it was really interesting. I liked it a lot. And then the funniest book, I actually had a hard time like figuring out what the funniest book was that I read, because I tend to like go for like gory and sad stuff. And yeah, it also shows with me calling this the funniest book. It's Pizza Girl by Jean Kyung Fraser, and it's about this girl who's 18, and she is pregnant. Her father has recently died, and now instead of going off to college, she is working at a pizza delivery place, and then she gets this weird phone call from a woman asking her if she could put pickles on the pizza because that's the only thing her son wants to eat. And so she goes out, buys the pickles, puts it on the pizza, and then she meets the woman, and then she becomes obsessed, absolutely obsessed with this woman, and they become friends as well. And it seems that they have like this sort of symbiotic relationship, which also kind of like veers onto like the toxic. And this girl also at the same time is trying to deal with the loss of her father, even though he wasn't that good of a father. But yeah, having explained that, it doesn't really sound funny, but it's just kind of like the little things. I don't really have an example, but you know, like, even though like things might be hard, there's always kind of like one thing in the day, during the day, that makes you laugh for no particular reason. So that's kind of like what I meant with regards to it being a funny book. Now, I have goals for the next quarter. I want to read more translated books. Like I said before, a lot is just coming from the UK and the US, and I'm just kind of like, I'm feeling the FOMO here. Another goal is that I want to be better with ARCs, and in this case I don't mean with like reading them on time, but actually just requesting far less, actually just not requesting anymore, because I really just want to read less 2020 books. Another one, like I said previously, is that I want to read more queer books, specifically by queer authors. Yeah, I definitely want to read more of that, because it's like 1 or 2, what was it? I can't even remember. It was like such a small percentage. The next is that I want to read more classics, more specifically classics that people usually don't read. So like none of like your Steinbeck or Shakespeare or Bronte sisters, etc., etc. And also like non-Western ones as well, specifically. So I'm actually working on that now. I have this diverse classics literature book club on my Patreon, and we've read 2 titles so far. Chronicle of a Death Foretold by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which I loved, and this month we read Kokoro by Natsume Soseki, which was great as well. And next month we're reading Imperium in Imperio. I think that's the title, and it's basically this African American piece of literature from the 19th century, which was also very hard to find that type of literature. But anyway, it's about this man who finds out that there is another government in America that is led by Black people. And so yeah, it's kind of like the title says, it's like an imperium inside an imperium. So that sounds super interesting, and especially like since it's such an old piece of literature, I'm just very excited to read the story. So my last goal is to read more Dutch and Japanese literature, and I don't know why it's so hard for me to like just pick up a Dutch book and read it. Because like there are a lot of gems within Dutch literature. I'm sure of that because I found them myself. One of my favorite authors is Willem Frederik Hermans, and the fun thing about that as well is that Pushkin Press has been publishing his work in English, and so I can like also do like, I don't know, like Dutch book reviews on him and like Dutch translated work, so that people who don't speak Dutch can also like get to know. With regards to Japanese books, I'm talking about Japanese literature that isn't like manga. So I have loads of Japanese books at home here, so I should be good on that. And then finally, I didn't write this one down, but I've been trying to do this actually for a couple of days, is just like read one book. Try and read one book at a time, because sometimes it gets really really out of hand. I remember a couple of weeks ago, someone messaged me on Instagram and they were like, you have 17 books on your currently reading shelf on Goodreads. Like, are you reading them all at the same time? And I was like, oh, Gosh, yeah, like it was because I went and I checked as well, and it was like books that I hadn't like picked up for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months. And yeah, you eventually forget. And I feel like if there's such huge spaces between reading a book, you might like enjoy it less. And yeah, I'm really trying to be good on that. Right now I'm actually doing quite well. I'm listening to the third book in the Hunger Games trilogy, because as we all know, the prequel is coming out, and I'm really interested to see how that works out. And then like physical books, I'm reading The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. So yeah, I'm actually quite proud of myself that I've whittled it down to just one audiobook and one physical book. And then finally, the last question: what are you most looking forward to? And yeah, reading diverse classics, really. Yeah. I have been talking a bit more about that on my channel, and I've noticed that people are also getting very excited about that, because I also kind of feel sometimes you have kind of like these waves of books that like just come passing through, and obviously that is because of the publishing industry reaching out to bookstagrammers and YouTubers, asking them to promote a specific book because it's coming out soon. And so you just have like this flush of like a couple of books every single month. Like for instance, in January it was like Such a Fun Age, and then you barely hear anything from those books again, because we're already moving on to the next best thing. And you know, there's nothing wrong with that, because in the end, like, publishing is still a business, and of course you want to support authors as much as you can. But yeah, it just kind of like makes booktube and bookstagram a bit homogenous at times. But yeah, I do sometimes feel that, at least to a certain extent, that the publishing industry sort of dictates what I'm reading. And yeah, that makes sense. If you're a book reviewer, you mainly review books that are coming out soon. So yeah, I'm just here, like, I'm not actually getting paid to review books, so like I might as well pick the books myself and choose like a wider scope and not only 2020 books. So that's kind of like where my headspace is at the moment with regards to reading habits. But yeah, I'm actually quite happy that I did this. It's just very interesting seeing all these insights. So I'll definitely be doing this in the future as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. A huge thank you to Barbara, Chris, Diane, Jen, Nikolai and Tara for supporting me over on Patreon.